The bell above the door chimed softly as Eliana stepped into the cafe, shaking off the chill of the late November wind. The place hadn't changed in years. The same old wooden tables, warm yellow lights, and the familiar hum of soft jazz playing in the background. Her favorite seat by the window was still open, as if it had waited just for her. She slid into the booth and ordered her usual, black coffee, 2 sugars. Her hands wrapped around the warm ceramic cup, but her eyes, they kept darting toward the door. It had been 3 years since she first met Jace here. He had walked in during a thunderstorm, completely drenched, and asked to share her table because the cafe was full. She hadn't even looked up at first, until he made a joke about soggy cookies being underrated. She laughed. That was the start. They became friends fast. Almost too fast. And somehow, in between late-night conversations and shared playlists, Eliana had fallen in love with him. But she never said it. Not even once. Because every time she looked into his eyes she saw warmth, but not the kind that held promises. Jace was chaos wrapped in charm. He'd show up with flowers and no explanation. He'd text her at 2 a.m. with poetry and then disappear for days. He made her heart race and break at the same time. But Eliana never walked away. Maybe she thought, one day he'd choose her. The last time she saw him it was snowing. He had kissed her on the forehead and said, "Don't wait up tonight. I've got something I need to clear up." That was 8 months ago. Since then no calls. No messages. Nothing. But Eliana kept coming back here. Every Thursday. Same booth. Same coffee. Same hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd walk through that door again. "Still waiting for someone?" asked Maya, the waitress, placing a cookie beside her cup. It was a question she asked every week, but her voice was gentler now. Less curious, more empathetic. Eliana nodded slightly, offering a small smile. Just passing time. But the truth was, time wasn't passing at all. It had stopped the moment Jace walked away. Outside, the town moved on. Christmas decorations were going up. Children giggled as they ran down the sidewalks. But inside her heart, it was still snowing. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. No new messages. Her fingers hovered over his contact. Jace. No last name. Just his name and the last text he sent. "I'll explain everything soon. Promise." She never deleted it. Never replied either. What was there to say? Her friends had stopped asking. Her sister had begged her to let go. But how do you stop waiting for someone who left mid-sentence? The door opened again. Eliana looked up. Just another stranger. Laughing. Holding someone else's hand. She looked back down at her coffee. Cold now. Just like the space he left behind. She whispered under her breath, as if confessing to the wind. If I had known waiting would feel like this, maybe I wouldn't have started at all. But it was too late. Because sometimes, the worst goodbyes are the ones that never happen. Setting. Eliana's apartment. Flashbacks unfold. Theme. Memories, emotional weight, confusion. The apartment felt emptier than usual that night. Eliana kicked off her boots by the door and hung up her coat, taking a moment to stare at the quiet space. The plants she once tended with care now drooped in dry silence. Books gathered dust. Even the couch had an untouched feel, as if no one had sat on it for days. Or maybe that was just her. She walked into the kitchen and turned on the kettle, but the routine felt mechanical, her hands moving while her heart sat still. There was a photo on the fridge, not of her and Jace, no. He never liked pictures. But it was a blurry shot she took of him from across the cafe, laughing with his head thrown back, unaware she'd even aimed her camera. She had printed it secretly. Not because he asked her to. Because she couldn't stop herself. Memories were all she had now. And even those were starting to blur like old photographs fading at the edges. Eliana poured hot water over the tea bag and walked to her living room, where the silence grew louder. She curled up on the sofa, clutching the warm mug like it might ground her in something real. Her mind wandered, like it always did, to the question that had haunted her for months. Did I ever really know him? He had a way of making her feel like the only person in the world. But then he'd vanish, not just physically but emotionally. Sometimes, even when he sat right beside her, he felt galaxies away. And yet she still remembered the soft things. The way he'd hum old songs under his breath. How he'd read her horoscope out loud and tell her she was too much of a Virgo. The way his fingers brushed hers when he passed her a pen, like even that tiny contact mattered. What hurt the most wasn't the silence he left behind. It was the fact that she still listened for it, still waited for his knock, still believed in his promise to return. 8 months. 8 whole months of maybe tomorrow. Of, what if he's going through something? Of, people don't just leave without a reason. But maybe they do. She picked up her phone and opened Instagram, not to post, just to scroll to numb the ache. But as she tapped through stories, her breath caught. There he was. Smiling. Holding a surfboard. In California. Caption read. Starting over. Clean slate. New peace. No mention of her. No sign that he remembered the girl who waited every Thursday. No hint of the coffee dates or the almost love that lingered in her chest like an unfinished song. She stared at the screen, trying to process the wave crashing over her. It wasn't just shock. It was betrayal, not because he moved on but because he never even looked back. So this is what she was waiting for. Not a message. Not an apology. Just a post. Just proof that she had been erased. Her fingers hovered over his profile. Block. Message. Unfollow. Instead, she turned off her phone. Because the worst kind of heartbreak isn't being left behind. It's realizing they never intended to stay. A tear rolled down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it. She let it fall, soft, silent, and honest. Like everything she had ever been with him. She leaned back into the couch and whispered, more to herself than to him. You left, Jace. But you forgot to take the hope with you. And so it stayed. In every text she never sent. In every Thursday afternoon. In every heartbeat that still flinched at his name. Setting, Eliana's workplace and a surprise encounter. Theme, awakening, inner shift, emotional confrontation. The next morning came too quickly, like most did now. Sleep didn't soothe her anymore. It merely postponed the ache. Eliana sat at her desk, staring blankly at her computer screen. She worked as a junior editor at a small publishing house, where romance novels cluttered her inbox and love stories passed through her hands like cruel reminders of everything she no longer believed in. Her coworker Lena peeked into her cubicle. Hey, wanna grab lunch today? You've been ghosting the break room. Eliana forced a smile. Maybe later. But she knew she wouldn't. She hadn't joined them in weeks. It was easier to avoid small talk, laughter, and questions she couldn't answer. Around noon she slipped out and walked a few blocks down to a quiet park bench under a tree. The leaves were turning amber and falling around her like soft echoes. She opened her bag and pulled out a book, something she'd edited last month but never had the heart to read until now. The words were beautiful. About a woman who loved deeply, was left behind, and somehow found herself again. Eliana wasn't sure if it gave her hope or broke her a little more. She turned the page and then paused. A familiar voice behind her said, "You always did love sad endings." Her spine stiffened. She turned slowly. Jace. He stood there wearing a charcoal jacket, hands in his pockets, eyes softer than she remembered. Older maybe. Or maybe just distant. "Hi," he said quietly. Eliana's breath caught. She'd imagined this moment too many times. In dreams, in daydreams, in breakdowns. But now, seeing him here, she wasn't sure if she wanted to run, or scream. She said nothing. Just blinked. He took a hesitant step forward. "I was back in town. Thought maybe I'd see you at the cafe." "I stopped going last week," she said flatly. His eyes searched her face. "I figured." Silence fell between them like a wall neither knew how to climb. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said finally. "I didn't plan it." He gave a half smile, that same crooked grin she used to melt for. "It didn't work anymore. You disappeared, Jace." "I know." "No, you don't. You don't disappear for 8 months and say, 'I know,' like that explains everything." He looked down, his voice barely audible. "I wasn't good for you. And you think not saying goodbye was better?" He sighed. "I was a mess, Elle. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't want to hurt you." "But you did," she cut in. "Every Thursday. Every message I didn't get. Every promise you left hanging. He looked up at her, guilt flooding his face. I never stopped thinking about you. He laughed, bitter, tired. That's the thing, Jace. I didn't need your thoughts. I needed you to show up. Silence again. But this time it didn't ache as much. He took another step. Can we talk? Properly. Catch up. Maybe dinner. Eliana stared at him. The man she had waited months for. The man who vanished like a shadow, and now stood before her asking for something she wasn't sure she had left to give. She stood up, gathering her things. Jace, she said softly, for a long time I would have said yes before you even finished that sentence. But right now. He waited. I don't know who you are anymore. And honestly, I'm still figuring out who I am without you. He nodded slowly as if that answer hurt, but he understood. If you ever want to talk, he said, handing her a small note, you know where to find me. She took it but didn't look. I waited, Jace, she whispered. Too long. And now, maybe it's time I stop. Then she walked away, not with anger but with something that had taken months to build. Strength. She didn't cry. She didn't look back. And for the first time in a long time the waiting stopped walking beside her. Setting, 1 month later. Theme: healing, closure, quiet strength. It had been 4 weeks since she saw him. 4 Thursdays had passed, without a trip to the cafe, without the ache in her chest tightening around 3 p.m., and without scanning every door for his face. Eliana was still healing. Still learning. But something inside her had shifted the day she walked away. She never called him. She never opened the note he gave her. At first it sat on her nightstand like a trap. A small piece of paper that held questions and answers she thought she wanted. But the longer she avoided it, the more she realized. The closure she needed wasn't in his words. It was in her choice not to read them. And that choice felt like peace. She had started watering her plants again. Reading books just because she liked the titles. Joining Lena and the others at lunch even if she stayed quiet most of the time. Healing wasn't loud. It was slow. Quiet. Barely noticeable. Until one day she looked up from her tea and realized she hadn't thought about him in hours. That was the first win. And then came another. She returned to the cafe, not on a Thursday but on a Tuesday morning before work. It was quiet, almost empty. The light outside was soft and for the first time her favorite booth didn't feel haunted. Maya smiled as she served her usual. You look better today. Eliana smiled. I feel lighter. She sipped her coffee slowly, taking in the quiet hum of the place. This was hers now. Not a shrine to a ghost but a place that had always belonged to her, even when her heart didn't. She pulled out her journal. The same one she had left untouched for months. Her fingers hesitated, then wrote. I thought love was waiting. But maybe, real love doesn't make you wait. Maybe it meets you where you are. Or maybe, it grows inside you when you finally stop chasing what doesn't want to stay. She closed the journal and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. As she stood up to leave, the wind outside picked up. She held her coat tighter and stepped onto the sidewalk, the city moving gently around her. No chaos, no heartbreak. Just life. She didn't notice the man sitting 2 tables behind her. Someone who recognized her laugh, who had walked into the cafe moments after she did. Jace didn't approach her this time. He simply watched as she walked away, not out of spite or sadness but something deeper. Respect. He had come to apologize, maybe even ask again. But seeing her now, clear-eyed, calm, whole, he realized something he hadn't before. She didn't need his closure. She didn't need him at all. And in some strange, bittersweet way, that made him love her more. But he didn't follow. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let go of someone you once held too tightly. Back in her apartment that night, Eliana stood by the window sipping tea. The stars were faint but visible. She opened her drawer and took out the note one last time. She didn't read it. She burned it. Not out of anger, but because she didn't need anything from the past to define the peace she had now. As the paper turned to ash, Eliana whispered into the quiet. I waited long enough. Now, I'm coming home to myself. The waiting was over. And for the first time in forever, she wasn't expecting anyone to knock.